necessarily say that Neymar has thrown a spanner in the works by declaring that he wants to leave.
You say he hasn't thrown a spanner in the works. I mean, he's 31 now. He's been at the club since 2017. He's got 4 years left on his contract still. I mean, why now? Why is he now saying that he wants to leave Paris?
I think he's saying this now because, first of all, he's just started to prove his fitness post-surgery this pre-season. Scored twice in the final pre-season friendly against Jeonbuk before PSG returned to France from Asia. But also, this is the first time that both PSG and Neymar have been on the same page regarding his future. PSG have wanted to get rid of Neymar since last summer, but last summer, obviously just 6 months before the World Cup, Neymar wanted to stay put, get himself in best shape possible for Brazil and a possible push at the World Cup title. Obviously, we know now that that didn't happen. Neymar was plagued again by injury problems throughout the World Cup and also the club season. But this is the first time now that both the club and the player are, on the same page in the fact that, both sort of want to move on from what has been, largely an unhappy marriage between player and club. And now it gives PSG and Neymar an opportunity to look in the coming weeks into potential options for the Brazilian. There's already been plenty of speculation about his future so far this summer. We heard about Saudi Arabian clubs interested. There's also been intermediaries as well trying to push Neymar towards big Premier League clubs. But there's also been, a return to Brazil hinted at as well as a potential move to Major League Soccer and some other destinations.
You say Saudi, you say potential Premier League, you say maybe Brazil. What about Barcelona? Because that seems like the destination that the player wants, but can they actually afford to put a deal together for him?
That's a good question. Sort of in terms of the financials, it would be extremely hard for Barcelona to do so. You'd have to assume as well that any potential deal, would revolve around Barcelona potentially involving multiple players in a deal, and even then, that wouldn't guarantee that Barcelona still have the finances to do so. They still have big question marks over whether they can register all of their new signings this summer, before the start of their league season. So I think, it's quite fanciful at this moment in time to picture Neymar potentially returning to Spotify Camp Nou. But also at the same time, you've had Xavi talking publicly about Neymar, just a couple of weeks ago when it was originally put to Barcelona. And he suggested that despite the fact that he has a lot of respect for Neymar, who he is, as a guy and what he's done as a player, and the fact that they had a bit of time on the pitch together, that he wouldn't sort of entertain a potential return for the Brazilian. So while there is speculation about him potentially going back to Catalonia at this moment in time, I don't think that that's actually something that will turn into a reality, because I think the financial reality for Barcelona is just that it's not doable, and it would be too big a risk, especially at this stage of his career and with the injury history he's had.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks to see what happens with Neymar. What about Kylian Mbappe then? Where are we at with his future, Jonathan?
Well, things haven't changed too much between Mbappe and PSG at the moment. There's still this standoff over his future. PSG wants him to, commit to extending his future with PSG. But Mbappe, no closer to making a decision in favour of staying on with PSG. There is still the suspicion in Paris that Mbappe and Real Madrid have an agreement for next summer, the summer of 2024, so not this summer. And there is also the suspicion as well that Real Madrid might come to the table and make some sort of offer between now and the end of the transfer window, but that it would be well below what PSG would be, hoping to fetch for Mbappe. But at this moment in time, he's still training away from the senior squad in what's called the loft, which PSG are allowed to have in place until the end of the transfer window. However, if Mbappe was to be a PSG player still once the transfer window is shut, that's no longer an option for PSG. So there would have to potentially be some sort of integration. The other interesting thing is that with potentially Neymar and Marco Verratti moving on in the next couple of weeks, you'd also have to say that the squad that PSG have put together this summer, should Mbappe actually end up staying at PSG, would probably be the strongest argument that PSG could possibly put forward to him to potentially extend his contract.
Wow, okay, that's interesting. I mean, if Mbappe was to go, if Neymar was to go and they lost, well, they're two star players, aren't they? That would be a huge loss.
It would be a huge loss, but equally at the same time, PSG have never been considering separating with both. In an ideal world, they would have been able to separate with Neymar quite some time ago. Like I mentioned, it wasn't possible last summer because of the World Cup, and it hasn't been possible so far this summer because Neymar hadn't been on the pitch after his surgery up until very recently. So now that there is that proof that he can get out there, can play, and can still look like a difference maker, perhaps that gives PSG an opportunity now to potentially move him on somewhere. Same goes for Marco Verratti, who's been a bit in and out of the squad. But I don't see PSG separating with both Mbappe and Neymar. It would be a huge blow, and not just for PSG, but also for Ligue 1 as well in terms of star power.
And just lastly, Jonathan, while we've got you away from PSG, a player that is attracting a lot of interest over here, there are reports that Manchester United are interested in Jean-Claire Todibo at Nice. Tell us a little bit about him. What kind of player is he? And could he leave this summer? Will he leave this summer?
Yeah, he's a very interesting prospect. I mean, there's two very interesting names at Nice at this moment in time, Todibo being one, the other being Kefren Thuram. Obviously, Nice don't have European football coming up for next season, so those sorts of players are of interest to a number of European clubs. And there have been European giants looking at the likes of Todibo at the moment, not just clubs from the Premier League like Manchester United, but also Italian giants Juventus have looked into his situation as well. Todibo was somebody who burst on the scene quite young with Toulouse. Sort of has bounced around since he moved to Barcelona, also spent a bit of time in the Bundesliga, but has sort of made a home for himself with Nice over the last couple of years, paired very well for a brief period of time with William Saliba, obviously at Arsenal now, and has got himself into the reckoning really to break into the French senior setup in the next couple of years. So it's no surprise that big clubs are sitting up and taking notice of Todibo. And I think given the fact that Nice don't have European football this coming season, it is a really good opportunity this summer to potentially get a player, who is already, in my opinion, Premier League ready, but somebody who also has a bit more room to develop at a reasonable price. Because if Nice were to requalify for Europe, somebody like Todibo, I think, would fetch a lot more than he could potentially be available for this summer.
Jonathan, brilliant to chat to you this morning. Some great insight. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll speak to you soon. Yeah, really good to hear from Jonathan over in Paris. Let's just chat a little bit about Neymar. Sam, you're a Neymar stan. You think he can still do it in Europe? For you, I suppose money aside, because Barcelona, that is certainly an issue for them, where should he end up?
I think it's a tough one because I can hear all of the uproar around his situation. He's only played over 20 league games once since he's joined PSG. But when I looked at his stats earlier, it's like one of the best stats you would see for any forward player. Even last season when he missed half of the season, he still got 18 goals, 17 assists. He's got 195 goal contributions in 173 appearances for PSG, which is actually not really good for someone that has been there for so long. But he's a top goal scorer for Brazil as well, scored countless goals in the Champions League and assists as well. And the one time he was able to have a full season fit, they got to the Champions League final. And yes, he's 31 years old, but he's still got a lot to offer. But I am interested to see what he wants for himself, because I know Barcelona is like the ideal situation, but we know their financial situation. They're not going to be able to afford him. If he comes to the Premier League, will he be able to hack the demands in the Premier League? It's up in the air.
Jonathan there talked about potential return to Brazil. He also mentioned Saudi. I think when this story came about, a lot of people, maybe their first thought was Neymar's heading to Saudi.
Yeah,
just with what's happened this summer.
Yeah, looking at them going in for Mbappe as heavily as they did, if they can't get him to pull in another superstar like Neymar from PSG, would probably be the preferred option. Obviously, it would be able to be a permanent deal as well. He's a player that's struggled with injuries over the last few years, got some problems with his ankles at the moment as well. So Saudi seems to me that the logical next step for him. I wouldn't see a Premier League move coming in for him. I know he's been linked with the Premier League in the past. Chelsea would perhaps be the only team that you could possibly think of that might make a play for him, but I kind of feel like that ship sailed a little bit. I know, obviously, Sam, you'd like that very much because he's one of your favourite players, but Saudi just feels like the kind of opportunity that I think the player might. Obviously, I don't know Neymar, so I'm speaking without the knowledge of what he wants, but you kind of feel like that move would make sense, the financial offerings that there'd be. The Mbappe side of things doesn't look like it's happening now. I think he'd probably end up there.
Right, there is so much more to talk about with PSG. We'll do that a little bit later because we've got a couple of bits of breaking news to bring you now. First, coming out of West Ham, Edson Alvarez will arrive in London this morning ahead of starting his West Ham medical. West Ham hopeful of getting everything done so he can actually train with his new teammates ahead of Saturday's Premier League opener at Bournemouth. The deal will see West Ham pay Ajax an initial £32 million plus £2 million in performance-related add-ons, and the personal terms have been agreed. So an update for West Ham fans who are hopefully feeling positive that they're edging closer to a first transfer of the summer. Edson Alvarez will arrive in London this morning ahead of starting his West Ham medical. We've also got some news coming out of Manchester City as well, and Bernardo Silva is considering signing a new contract with the Premier League champion. City would like him to do so. He's got less than 2 years remaining on his current deal. There's been so much speculation around his future. City had previously said they wouldn't stand in his way if he did want to leave. Of course, Paris Saint-Germain and Barcelona have been interested in signing him this summer. I mean, what is your reaction to that? Because there has been, we've seen Gundogan leave, we've seen Mahrez leave. There's been a lot of talk about Bernardo Silva potentially leaving this. I mean, certainly positive news if you're a Manchester City fan.
I think so, because it felt at one point that this treble-winning side was going to be broken up, and Kyle Walker's future is still up in the air, even though he captained the side in the Community Shield final on Sunday. But he's only 28 years of age. It feels like his future's been discussed. In the last transfer window, I think there's a feeling that he may want to move closer to home. But you look at the asset he is there. He's an incredible player. He's been such a key part of what Man City have done over the last few years. And it felt pretty sad that it looked like he was on his way out. But if Man City can convince him and he actually does want to stay, let's give a huge boost to them, because I think there is perhaps a feeling that this side is maybe slightly weaker than it was last season. Yes, they've just signed Gvardiol. They may look to strengthen a bit further. Kovacic coming in for Gundogan. But it does feel like the side isn't quite where it was last year. But if they can tie down Walker and they can tie down Bernardo Silva, then things look slightly more settled. I'm sure Pep has a few plans up his sleeve. I think he knows what he's doing. I think we can credit him with that. But I think this would be big news for Man City if they were to keep him, and he's happy to stay.
Intelligent footballer, such a tactically flexible player as well. It's no coincidence that every summer he's linked with some really big teams abroad. Bernardo Silva would be a really important player for Man City to keep.
Yeah, it seems to be a morning of breaking news, because we've got some breaking news from Tottenham as well. And Mickey van der Veen has completed his Spurs medical and will formally sign his contract today. A formal announcement on his move from Wolfsburg is actually expected this afternoon. I just want to stick with Spurs for a moment, because we said we were going to chat Harry Kane as well. Negotiations between Bayern Munich and Tottenham ongoing. That is despite the latest and final offer for Harry Kane being rejected. Just a bit of breaking news reaching us from our chief reporter as well, Kaveh Solokul. Harry Kane has not travelled to Barcelona. We're told it's absolutely nothing to do with a potential transfer, by the way. Most players involved in Sunday's game haven't travelled. We understand that Kane is enjoying life under Ange Postecoglou at the moment, and it's looking more likely that he will stay at the club. That is the sort of latest from Kaveh today about him not travelling. Obviously, a lot of news came out yesterday. Just sort of bring us up to date with where we're at sort of following the weekend.
Well, yesterday we understand that Spurs rejected what was Bayern Munich's third and final offer for Harry Kane. But we understand negotiations are still ongoing, and Bayern could come back in with another bid. So neither side have completely walked away from negotiations at the moment. But I think Daniel Levy has been unhappy with the way Bayern Munich have given Spurs an ultimatum and the tactics they've used to try and force this deal over the line last week, giving those deadlines. But Spurs are keeping this dialogue open, because there is still a very real risk that Harry Kane could leave for free next summer. He could join a Premier League rival for free next summer. I think Kane wants his future sorted out this week, both from a Spurs point of view, respect to Spurs, but because of family reasons as well. He's expecting another child. So he wants it sorted out this week. Their first game is against Brentford on Sunday, live on Sky Sports. Can't wait to see how Spurs cope with life in the Premier League under Ange Postecoglou. Yeah. It's going to be so much fun to watch. And he's focused on staying at Spurs until something potentially changes. He's not ruling out staying at Spurs this season. I don't think he'll be signing a contract this summer, but he's committed to staying at Spurs if that is where his destiny lies. I think it's very different from 2 years ago, where he really wanted that move to Manchester City. But it's business as usual for him, and as Kaveh's telling us there, he's enjoying life under Ange Postecoglou, a fresh start. And it's more likely than not, I think, that he will be staying at Spurs this summer at least. I think Spurs have done well to make sure he doesn't join a Premier League rival this summer. It does look like he'll either be staying at Spurs or potentially moving to Europe. But I think as the days tick by, the way things are moving, it does look like he's going to be starting that first game against Brentford on Sunday.
That's the thing. It's not long to go now, is there?
Yeah.
It's a big few days.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Kane is probably one of the most unproblematic players that we've seen in history in terms of the quality that he has and the fact that he's made his ambition quite clear. Before Hojlund went to Manchester City, he made it clear that he wanted to, move on and challenge for trophies. But obviously he loves Spurs and he loves the fans and he wants to compete for trophies. He wants to win their first trophy in years. But at the same time, because of the quality he has, no one can really get onto him for not being able to, challenge for these trophies and put that next to the goals that he scores. So I think it's better for Spurs to deal with this quicker than letting it drag out, because like we said, Postecoglou coming into a new league with a whole new system is going to be completely different if Kane is not in that team, and it's better to deal with that now.
At least some Spurs fans have something to be positive about today with Van der Ven, well, hopefully being announced later this afternoon.
Yeah, being compared to Virgil van Dijk, had good numbers in the Bundesliga last season. As a modern-day centre-back, I think he probably has everything that Spurs would want and fits in with the more expansive style of football that Postecoglou wants to play. So he's the right age as well. And I do feel that at the moment at Spurs, that even though they've got all this stuff going on with Kane, I think there is a little bit of feel-good still there. I do think Postecoglou's brought a different shift in mentality across from what's been there at Spurs under the previous regime. So I just think if they can get to day one with Harry Kane there, get a couple of new signings in, you can see that there's a rebuild going on. I've always thought if Kane's there at the start of the season, day one, he will be a Spurs player for the rest of the season. And I think they'll be banking on the fact that Postecoglou can bring this feel-good and show they're going in the right direction, get a couple more signings in of the ilk of Van der Ven, then Kane could be persuaded maybe to sign a contract as the season goes on.
Yeah, well, it's been a morning of breaking news so far. So a reminder of that news from Tottenham then. Mickey Van der Ven has completed his Spurs medical and will formally sign his contract today. Formal announcement on that move coming, well, hopefully a little bit later on this afternoon. Bernardo Silva is considering signing a new contract with Manchester City. There is news coming out of West Ham as well, because Edson Alvarez will arrive in London this morning ahead of starting his West Ham medical. We're going to talk much more about West Ham next, because they're trying to sign, well, not just Edson Alvarez, they're trying to sign a whole load of players, yet to sign anybody, of course. But will they get anyone in before their first game of the season? Of course, they're hoping for Alvarez, but will it remain that way? We're going to see you in a few minutes' time. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. A little reminder for you of the breaking news we've already brought you this hour. Harry Kane has not travelled to Barcelona for Tottenham's pre-season game tonight. We're told it is nothing to do with a potential transfer. Sticking with Spurs, though, Mickey van der Veen has completed his medical and will formally sign his contract today. That is a deal rising to a potential £43 million from Wolfsburg. And also, Bernardo Silva is considering signing a new contract with Manchester City. There is absolutely loads going on at the moment because West Ham as well. We told you also this hour, of course, they're yet to make a signing this transfer window, but Edson Alvarez will arrive in London this morning ahead of starting his medical in East London. The deal will see West Ham pay Ajax an initial £32 million plus £2 million in performance-related add-ons. James, I mentioned it there, West Ham yet to sign a player. Finally, West Ham fans, just days out from their first game, have something to be happy about.
I think they've got a really good signing, 32 million with £2 million in performance-related add-ons. They're hopeful that he can train this week so he can feature this weekend against Bournemouth. I think it gives West Ham a bit of a lift. They had a really difficult summer so far. Declan Rice leaving, took so long to replace him. Lost 4-0 at the weekend in pre-season as well. But they're bringing in a player who I think will fill the void somewhat left by Declan Rice. I think it's impossible to do it with one player when you consider the overall Declan Rice package. That's why Arsenal paid £105 million for him. But he's a defensive midfielder. He can also play as a centre-back. I don't think he'll be playing much there for West Ham. Ball playing, holding midfielder. He reads the game really well, good in possession. So I think he will help fill the void left by Declan Rice. I'm not sure how West Ham will look to use him, whether it will be alongside Souček and maybe a more attacking player like Paqueta. We wait to see. But I think they have signed a really good player, good level experience, mid-20s, played a number of times for Mexico, more than 60 times for Mexico. So he's a player who has potential but also has proven himself as well. So I think West Ham are just delighted they've got someone through the door because things are looking pretty desperate for a while.
Yeah, Alvarez, like you said, a player with Champions League experience, got a whole load of international caps. Seems loved by Ajax fans as well, because I was looking at some compilation videos like you do on YouTube. But even Ajax fans underneath are saying, like, we're happy for you to move on, we're happy for you to go and do your thing. Is a defensive midfielder, like you said, that I think some West Ham fans feel can maybe complement Lucas Paqueta as well. But you mentioned he can play as centre-back. Let's talk about a centre-back they are hoping to get in Harry Maguire. Where are we with that? Because that seems to be going on and on.
Yeah, so we've seen them linked with him for the last few months now. They did have a bid rejected last month for £20 million, but we know Manchester United have now gone in with a bid of £30 million and it hasn't been rejected or accepted. West Ham have gone back in, so it hasn't been rejected or accepted, but it does look like there is negotiations ongoing, and I think that this move would make sense as well for Harry Maguire and the club. They lost their captain, so getting in, Manchester United's former captain, a player with England experience, European experience as well, would be a good signing. So they're hoping that they'll probably get over the line.
That's sort of the West Ham's perspective. When you look at Harry Maguire's perspective, you could say maybe at the moment is in a position where he maybe needs a fresh start. He certainly wants game time if he wants to be playing for England.
I mean, I think Gareth Southgate's shown whatever's going on with his game time at club level, he will still get picked for England. And in fairness to Harry Maguire, even though his form suffered in the Premier League with Manchester United, I don't think he's ever really let England down. I thought he was fantastic again in the World Cup when there was a massive spotlight on him with people saying he shouldn't be picked because he wasn't playing for Manchester United. I just think you're right, he needs a fresh start. I think even when Manchester United have had defensive injuries, Luke Shaw's tended to be the one to move across and play left centre-back. He's recently lost the captaincy. I actually think him getting the captaincy at Manchester United in 2019 really early in his tenure there, I think that was the beginning of the end, really. I think it put him under undue pressure, giving him that armband so early when he was still trying to settle in. I don't think he was a natural fit for captain at Manchester United, but at that point, Manchester United weren't the team that they are now. They didn't really have a direction of travel. I think they were a little bit all over the place. I think his confidence now is pretty low whenever he pulls on the Manchester United shirt. We've seen him getting booed in pre-season friendlies. I think if you give him a manager like David Moises, who will perhaps put his arm around him, will play a bit more of a defined defensive system, not as expansive like Ten Hag's been trying to play. We've seen with England, when you put him into that defined defensive system, he can perform well. I think Maguire's worry might be, though, what direction are West Ham heading in? At the moment, he might want to see them do a little bit more business before he commits. But, on the face of it, a move to West Ham playing Europa League football, I do just think Harry Maguire needs to get out of Manchester United now.
It's not the only Manchester United player that West Ham are looking at, though, is he?
No, Manchester United have rejected a £30 million bid from West Ham for Scott McTominay. Now, we understand that Man United value him close to £45 million, and United are happy to keep him. He played nearly 40 games for them in all competitions last season. He's viewed as the biggest sale, though, that they could have in this window, so that may tempt Manchester United. I think they look at his international record. He scored twice against Spain last season. His age, professionalism, physical condition, that's why they see him being a player worth around £45 million. So wait to see whether West Ham are willing to go that high for him. I'm not sure how he necessarily complements Alvarez in midfield. I think maybe they'd want something a little bit more forward-thinking. I think when you look at McTominay's game, it's not so much about goals and assists. I think he works well in a 3. In a 2, he sometimes gets a bit found out when playing alongside Fred, but alongside a better player, we've seen the best of McTominay as well. So I think Manchester United would be reluctant to let him go because they would have to replace him, whether Amrabat would be the player that comes in. But I think Manchester United fans have a lot of goodwill towards him, an academy graduate, scored some really important goals for him during his time at Manchester United. So 45 million is what they're after. We wait to see if West Ham look to go close to that.
Yeah, you say United reluctant to let him leave. There are reports that Erik ten Hag would want to keep him. It's just a case of if they can get a big sale and get that 45 million and maybe thereafter, then they would let him go. I mean, for you, Dan, 45 mil, does that make sense?
I think it's probably about right in the modern day market. If you think Declan Rice has gone for 105 million all in with 1 or 2 years left on his contract, I think Manchester United asking for 45 million for McTominay is probably fair. Slightly disagree with you about the partnership with Alvarez. I think McTominay actually plays better when he's given that freedom to get into the box and arrive late and come from deep. I actually think that's the makings of a tenacious partnership. The two of them, we've said all along this window that it's going to take more than one player to replace Rice. I think if you have them two in there and you've got Souček competing as well, I actually think that would solve a lot of West Ham's problems. So remains to be seen what will happen. Manchester United, of course, will be happy if they do get to keep him. But for West Ham, I think getting those two in would be as good as it could probably get, replacing Declan Rice.
Yeah. OK, right. Loads still to come on Good Morning Transfers. On the way for you, Chelsea are getting closer to signing a new midfielder. Plus, Liverpool fail again in their attempts to sign Romeo Lavia from Southampton. Hi there, welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Right, let's turn our attention to Chelsea now. Delighted to say we can speak to broadcaster and Chelsea fan, Soraya Shiraz. Soraya, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for coming on the show. First of all, just sum up the window for us as a Chelsea fan. Are you happy with the business so far?
Good morning. It's a pleasure. Well, as a Chelsea fan, I think the sporting directors, Lawrence Stewart and Paul and Stanley, have done a really positive job. In early parts of the window, 11 players out, whether that was permanent or loan. We've had Disasi from Monaco, who's a centre-back, can also play right centre-back, who was a partnership with Badiashile as well at Chelsea. So we've had another French international join us. Of course, Nicholas Jackson, who had a blazing pre-season, two goals, 3 assists in 5 games. So I've been really impressed with our new number 9. Christopher Nkunku, another French international. Leslie Ugochukwu, finally, we got a defensive midfielder. Sanchez, Brighton. And of course, the big one that Chelsea fans have been looking forward to, Levi Colwill, getting his contract extended. And I think this sort of sets a precedent at the club. All these players are 25 and under. They're really successful internationally and they come in really committed to the club and ready to go. So I think as fans, it gets us really invested in the process, getting invested into knowing this new squad with this new talent. But also it's great to have all these French internationals join our team and have that morale on and off the pitch. Yeah,
of course. But maybe the big player that you Chelsea fans want in is Moises Caicedo. Just a few days to go until the start of the season, Soraya. How much do you want to get this deal done?
I've never wanted a deal done so bad, and I thought after Enzo Fernandez that we would be through this part. But I feel like with Enzo, we need a strong defensive midfielder by him, someone that can free him up, who will cover, run ground, can play on the counter, make those really strong connecting passes. Caicedo had a brilliant season with Brighton, of course. He's young, and he has that very strong attribute of actually being able to win possession, and then push the ball forward to take shots for the team. So that is really underrated. In last season in the Premier League, Caicedo was second in possession wins that led to shots with 18. And the only other person that got more than that was, of course, Manchester City's Rodri. So for me, getting this deal done for us, I think is integral. Of course, this weekend we play Liverpool at home, and I really hope to see Caicedo walk into the starting 11.
Oh, God, big game, isn't it? Big game.
Big game.
I mean, you say integral. Do you feel it's likely that it's going to happen?
I'm more on the positive spectrum. I feel like Chelsea wouldn't have been in dialogue this long if they didn't feel like the deal would come to play. Of course, it's been reported that Caicedo hasn't gone to Brighton training. He's put his stance forward. He wants to leave. For me, this many bids later, this close to the league starting, I'm going to be positive. And with the track record under these new owners, if they want a player, they get the player. So I'm going to be that positive blue today and pray that at some point before September 1st, Moises Caicedo is a Chelsea player.
I like it. We're all about positivity on this show, so this is good. Just lastly, before we let you go, Romelu Lukaku's future is obviously still sort of unresolved at the moment. How do the fans feel? Because it feels like it's a real shame that it hasn't worked out, him coming back to the club.
I think any football club supporter fan whose club spends 100 million on a player, you want him to succeed. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and it was a very complex situation. But now we know we're in the market for a striker. Now we have attacking midfielders. We have Nicholas Jackson. We have players that can score. For me, Pochettino has been very clear in this pre-season and coming in as Chelsea manager. He wants players that want to play for Chelsea. He wants players committed to the club, and he wants players a part of this long-term project. Romelu Lukaku is not that, and he's made it clear that he wants to leave too. All I can hope for as a Chelsea fan and representing Chelsea fans is that we come to the point where both sides can be happy, the player gets to leave, and the club gets some good business from that on the back of it. And Pochettino gets to go into the new season with a squad that isn't inflated and players that know they're a part of the new rebuild.
Oh, Soraya, lovely to have you on. Brilliant that you're wearing blue as well. That was a nice touch.
Always a good touch.
Always. Keep the positivity and obviously good luck for that massive game on Sunday. And we'll chat to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Of course she's wearing blue, obviously. Let's just discuss some of those talking points then. I want to start by talking about Moises Caicedo. Just to sort of bring us up to date with where we're at, because this is the information that Dharmesh Sheth brought us yesterday, saying that it could, of course, be a crucial week in Chelsea's pursuit of the Brighton midfielder. They are expected to go back in with an improved offer. Caicedo was given the weekend off with, basically because of all this speculation going on actually around his future, Chelsea's latest bid, worth £80 million, was rejected. Brighton's valuation remains in the region of £100 million. Sam, we heard from Soraya there. She's being positive about it, but it just feels like it's just dragging on and on and on now.
Yeah, it feels that way, but I can understand the stance that Brighton are on, because obviously they don't want to lose one of their best players. But at the same time, I think when you're seeing De Zerbi talking about it now, he seems a little bit dejected about the whole situation, the fact that he doesn't really have a hold on what's going to happen, because if Chelsea come in with the right bid, then he's going to leave. So he can't really plan, as much as he is planning for the future, he can't really plan as well as he'd want to, because he knows if he loses Caicedo, he's going to need to replace him. And he's already said he's one of the best players in the world in his position. So to have it dragging on, and also for Chelsea, you want that type of quality starting your season. And I think it's going to be quite difficult for both teams, for him to embed into the team, but also for Brighton losing him. So it's better they just sort it out as soon as possible.
Yeah, could be a lot going on with Chelsea, because they've also opened talks with Leeds over the signing of Tyler Adams. Does that move make sense for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think Caicedo is going to be one that goes on right till the wire, and Chelsea can't afford, I don't think, to be without a central midfield. So only their options are pretty limited at the moment. Gallagher's obviously still there at the moment. We don't know what's going to happen with him, but I would say he's not suited to being a 6 in Pochettino's system. So Tyler Adams is a player who's now got Premier League experience after a season with Leeds, has played in the Champions League and played in the Bundesliga. I think he's a leader as well. He's very tenacious. He wins the ball all over the pitch. I think actually if you look at his heat maps and where he wins the ball back for his teams, it tends to be actually in the wide areas, so coming across from his central midfield position into the wide areas. And I just think on the right-hand side, Chelsea obviously have Reece James or Gusto. If they're bombing forward, I think Tyler Adams is a sensible player to have as a 6, because he's athletic enough to get across and cover. I think he's a multifunctional player as well, who's played right back. So I think for 20 million, if Chelsea are worried that they're not going to get Caicedo, I don't think they can get anyone better in than Tyler Adams for that price point. So I would say arguably they need both. Anyway, even if they sign Caicedo, I would say Tyler Adams is probably needed just because of the numbers in Chelsea's central midfield. So we'll wait and see what happens, but they definitely need freshening up in there, because I just don't think they've got the numbers at the moment.
Interesting to hear Soraya sort of give her kind of verdict of the transfer window so far, and really happy about Nkunku. Obviously, there's news now that he could be out for a few months because of this knee problem. What does that mean? Because certainly for Chelsea fans, I mean, that is just not the news you want to hear. We don't know how long it could be at the moment.
Yeah, it's really gutting for Chelsea fans, because during pre-season he's been one of their best players, if not their best player, and you can see the type of player he is. He's got world-class ability, he's tactically versatile as well, but he does emphasise the area that Chelsea have been trying to strengthen during this window, you know, the links with Cherki from Ligue 1, also Michael Elise as well. Those type of players that, you know, can fill that mould in the number 10, but also can play out wide as well. So I think him being injured now is going to force Chelsea to speed up their look for that type of player. But yeah, it's really unfortunate that he's injured.
Yeah, no doubt we'll talk plenty more about Moises Caicedo throughout the next, 24 days, is it? I think it is now. Right, coming up next, we're going to hear from Manchester United's latest signing. Plus, as promised, we'll have the latest from Liverpool as well, as they go in search for a new midfielder. Right, Manchester United's new striker Rasmus Hojlund is looking to help his side challenge for the Premier League title once again. Hojlund arrived from Atalanta in a deal worth £72 million and has been opening up on why he joined United and what type of player he is.
I know it's the most competitive league in the world, and playing for Man United has often been my dream, so this is two very important components which made me take this decision to come here. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to start working and getting on the pitch.
Okay, a quick one now. Could you describe yourself in 3 words?
Physical, passionate, and let's go with fast.
Right, that is United then, who have done all right this transfer window, bringing in Hojlund, bringing in Mason Mount, bringing in Onana, maybe Amrabat as well. Yet to see if that happens. But from United, let's go to what arguably their biggest rival, Liverpool, who haven't done loads, have they? Their latest £45 million bid for Romeo Lavia has been rejected, with Southampton wanting around £50 million. Just going to bring you what Jamie Carragher had to say about this yesterday. This is what he said and tweeted. This is embarrassing. Liverpool for years now have got deals done quickly with no fuss. If you don't think he's worth £50 million, move on. If you really want him, pay it. Also, not sure why Liverpool aren't in for Caicedo. Yes, it's a lot of money, but Liverpool got big money for Jordan Henderson and Fabinho. Sam, looking at that, do you agree with Cara?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think Liverpool, their biggest success in the last few years has come where they've had a 6, in Fabinho or Henderson, mainly Fabinho. And I think when you look at the teams that have won the Premier League or the Champions League as well, you need a 6 that is dominant at winning the ball, covering the wide areas, and especially a team like Liverpool where Trent and Robertson always fly forward. You need that 6. And I think when you see the teams that they played during pre-season, they've conceded, I think, 11 goals during pre-season. They've scored a lot of goals, but at the same time, going into the Premier League, it's going to be difficult for them not to have at least 1 6. And I think if they believe Lavia is that player, they should just go for him and just stop all the noise.
I'm sensing you disagree.
Look, Jamie Carragher knows much more about Liverpool and the inner workings than I do. I just think it's just the modern way, isn't it? With transfers, we've seen it with Rice, we've seen it with Kane. Teams don't just bid the amount straight away. It's staggered. It takes time, and Liverpool are acting no differently to how other teams act. And Jamie's talked as well about Liverpool operating in this self-sustainable way. They're not just going to throw the asking price at Southampton straight away. And we've seen Liverpool and Southampton deal with each other multiple times over the years. Lambert, Lallana, Klein, Lovren, Mane, and of course Virgil van Dijk. And the summer before Virgil van Dijk actually joined Liverpool for £75 million, Liverpool had walked away at 60 and then waited, went back in January. So I'm sure Liverpool will get Lavia, but it's just this modern way of transfers that teams just don't pay the money straight away. They try and test how far they can push the fee.
But Southampton don't need to sell him. He's got a long-term contract, and realistically, they want to come back into the Premier League, and he's one of their most important players. I understand what you're saying.
He won't want to play in the Championship, will he?
He won't want to play in the Championship, but it's not really down to him. He signed a contract. He's very young as well. The price is a lot, but at the same time, Liverpool need him more than Southampton need the money. So I think it's more for Liverpool to, dump up the money that Southampton are asking for and then be prepared for the season ahead.
That's the thing, isn't it? Do Liverpool need him more?
I think Liverpool really need something. It's not been the transfer window I think Liverpool fans would have hoped for, especially when you consider the players that left through the back door, whether it be leaving like Henderson and Fabinho going to Saudi, or players at the end of their contracts, the likes of Naby Keita, who didn't have the Liverpool career he'd have wanted. Milner, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Firmino, players that have left as well. That holding midfield gap does need to be filled. You head into the game this weekend against Chelsea, the only 2 senior options they have to play in that holding midfield are probably Alexis McAllister and Curtis Jones, and McAllister favours playing a little bit further forward, so it doesn't feel like that's where suits him at this moment in time. Alexander-Arnold did play there in pre-season towards the end of last year, but the way Jurgen Klopp's been speaking, it feels like he's going to play right back, mainly because of the lack of options they have at right back in senior positions. So it does feel like they're in a position where they're very exciting going forward. All the players are back fit, but it does feel like there's gaping holes in defence, and that is going to be their problem this season. But I don't think Lavia is necessarily the option to come in now and solve all Liverpool's solve all their problems, which is a concern with just a few days to go until the start of the season.
Yeah. Right, we've got a few minutes left on the show, so I'm just going to fire some clubs at you, some players at you, just some of the transfer lines that we've missed. Sam, I'll start with you. Arsenal, where are we at with David Raya and also Folarin Balogun?
Yeah, Arsenal rejected a bid from Monaco for Balogun, who scored 22 goals in all comps. They want around £50 million, and I think the way you're seeing the market and the type of strikers and the age profile as well, I think that is quite fair as well. Inter Milan are expected to push for Balogun as well after missing out on Scamacca. And then, obviously, Arsenal still progressing talks with Brentford over a deal for David Raya, who's going to come in and hope to compete with Ramsdale, who had a really good game in the Community Shield, so it's going to be quite competitive at Arsenal.
Going to come to you next. Forest, Matt Turner.
Yeah, this could be announced today. He had a medical yesterday, deal worth around £10 million. He'll join Ethan Horvath and Wayne Hennessy as the two senior options there at the moment. I think they may look to try and get another goalkeeper as well.
Go on.
But Dean Henderson, talks continue between Forest and Manchester United. I think crucially there's a willingness from all parties, Manchester United, Dean Henderson and Nottingham Forest, to get this deal done. So successful at the start of that loan spell, then picked up an injury. He's not played since he's picked up that injury. So I think that may be why there's a little bit of time taken with this deal, because we're not quite sure where his fitness level is at. He's not featured for Manchester United yet in pre-season. And also in terms of outgoings, we spoke about potentially Scott McTominay and Harry Maguire. Well, Fred, Fulham remain interested in him, so they're expected to reopen talks with Manchester United. Manchester United looking for around £20 million for him. Fulham weren't interested in that sort of prize, but they're going to come back to the table. And also negotiations with Real Sociedad ongoing around Donny van der Beek. It's not quite worked out. I think it's been really frustrating. When he signed, there was a lot of optimism, but he didn't get the game time under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think it's going to be difficult for him to find his way back into the side. Eric Bailly, another player who could leave it. And so the focus for now, you mentioned the players coming into Manchester United, the focus now on outgoings. If they get this business done in terms of outgoings, maybe they can go back to the table and bring more in.
You've got 20 seconds to talk about Burnley and Sander Berge.
Yeah, huge loss for Sheffield United if this goes through a direct competitor to try and stay in the Premier League. I suspect Sheffield United have already lost a couple of players as well, and just reading Twitter and looking on other websites, Sheffield United fans are concerned, and I think they've got every right to be.
Well done. Kept the time. Right, well, this show, a little reminder for you, this show is back tomorrow. Good Morning Transfers returns 9 o'clock. It is, of course, every single weekday. You can see that here on Sky Sports News. Transfer Talk returns at midday. We'll be here. We'll also be joined by Italian football experts Mina Rizzucchi and Nicky Bandini as well. And the Transfer Show is back. Different time of 5 and 6 this evening, so make a note of that. But there is plenty more on the way for you here on Sky Sports News. More transfer news to come. Plus, we have the latest from the Women's World Cup.